When I think of super muscular Marvel comic book characters, I think of none other than the one and only Hulk, the Incredible Hulk. This big green giant has muscles for days, and he could do absolutely anything he wants in terms of strength. And on top of that, he could probably compete bodybuilding as well. I mean, look at that physique. It's incredible. Well, in this video, I actually want to break down his physique from what would be a bodybuilding perspective. Actually, just how good is his physique? Does he actually like win the Mr. Olympia, or is his physique just so out of whack he's got too much muscle that he couldn't even compete? What does that actually look like from a bodybuilding perspective? So let's take a look at Hulk's physique and kind of break it down and see how he would do. Now, first of all, there's a lot of different renditions of Hulk's physique. We can go to the CGI version, we could go to the comic version, we could go to Lou Ferrigno's version, who, if you don't know, was an amazing bodybuilder back in the day. So take a look at this physique right here. This is incredible. Look at these traps, look at this chest, look at that overall physique. So Lou Ferrigno actually competed in the 70s and then had an amazing comeback in the 90s. He was a massive bodybuilder. If I'm not mistaken, he might have been the biggest bodybuilder up until, maybe of all time. Honestly, he's one of the biggest for sure. But definitely in the 70s, he was one of the biggest. He made Arnold look kind of small, to be honest. Look at this picture of them both. Look how big he is. Now, of course, he wasn't as cut as Arnold, which is why he didn't win the Mr. Olympia. But I think if he would have stayed in it a few more years, I think he definitely would have won, because if he could have got his conditioning on point too, he definitely had a good shot. And then this is him when he came out of retirement kind of in the 90s. Like, that's him being more cut at an older age. So yeah, this guy was absolutely massive. So if we're talking about this version of the Hulk, of course he could compete at the Olympia level. He's got an incredible physique. He would do very, very well. But we're not talking about that version. We're talking about the Hulk, the one that inspired it all, the comic book version of the Hulk. Now, of course, we could go really far back into the comics and we could see his physique is still really good back then. But, it's like, I like looking at the more modern renditions because I think they get the muscle proportions just a little bit better. So let's take a look at modern renditions of the Hulk in comic book style or drawn style. So to me, there's some really good pictures here, and you can see like his physique is just absolutely massive. And if we're looking from a bodybuilding perspective, in real life they have slightly different angles that they look at and stuff, but here we're just going to look at 4 different categories. We're going to look at muscular size, we're going to look at symmetry, we're going to look at proportions, and we're going to look at conditioning. So just how well would he do? And keep in mind, we're actually going to compare him to actual bodybuilders, like, for instance, the GOAT, Ronnie Coleman. This guy was one of the biggest and best to ever do it. Ronnie Coleman had like a 10 out of 10 on every aspect, conditioning, proportions, all that sort of stuff. So this guy was the GOAT. So that's who I would probably compare the Hulk to, because this is one of the biggest bodybuilders of all time, while the Hulk is one of the biggest Marvel characters of all time from a bodybuilding perspective. So when we look at his physique, and this is kind of a general overview of his physique, we see that 10 out of 10 on muscles. Like, you're not going to beat this. Like, he's got muscles for days. He expands his frame. He makes it even, he's got more muscle than his frame honestly could probably even hold. Like, at this muscle size, he probably needs to actually be like 15 foot tall or something. So it's pretty crazy. So he obviously gets a 10 out of 10 on muscles. So in terms of symmetry, it's hard to beat a drawn character, honestly, like, unless they're drawn to be asymmetrical, which are very few characters. You're going to get a 10 out of 10 on symmetry. So he gets a 10 out of 10 on muscularity, 10 out of 10 on symmetry. Now we look at what I call proportions, which are kind of like, how does his arms line up with his chest, or how do his arms line up with his legs, or vice versa, or whatever. So when we take a look at that, I think this is a good kind of direct shot of him here. We see that his muscles, his arms are like massive. Like, they're like as big as his waist, which is typically really good. But we also see that like his forearms right there and his calves are like the same size as his upper arms and his quads and stuff. And in bodybuilding, really one of the best parts about it is we can get this aesthetic kind of Greek god kind of shape. And when you get that, you get a really good flow to the physique. So in my opinion, I think his forearms are a bit too big to match his bis and tris. I think his calves are a bit too big to match his quads and his hamstrings. Now, that's not to say that they're not great. Obviously, they're 10 out of 10 on muscle, but in terms of proportions and the flow of his physique and everything from a bodybuilding perspective, I would have to definitely deduct some points for that. So, you know, instead of a 10 out of 10 on proportions, he might get like a 7 or something like that. So his proportions definitely are a little bit off, and that's because he's not drawn to be a bodybuilder. Even though he has that kind of muscularity, he's drawn to be a monster. This is the Hulk, for crying out loud. He's a freaking monster, right? So the last thing that we would look at is the conditioning. How well conditioned is he? And honestly, in every type of shot that we see him in, you can see what's called feathering in the muscles. So anytime someone's like super ripped, you can see just the feathering. You can see the muscle striations like right there in the muscle. So that's really awesome. You can see the muscular separation. So like right here, this is the separation between his delts, his triceps, and his biceps. And that goes for like every muscle group in his body too, not just that one area. So we have that. We also have some really good vascularity too. So it's really hard to beat this guy in conditioning as well. I mean, I could be kind of nitpicky. Like there's some shots, well, obviously that one, but there's some shots where maybe he's less striated, maybe he's a little bit more striated. Kind of depends on what we look at. Like right here, no striations at all, but of course that depends on the artist rendition and stuff like that. But in general, he's got really good conditioning, and I would probably give him, I don't know, maybe like a, I don't feel like I can't quite give him a 10 out of 10, but he's very close. It probably depends on the shot. Some of these might be a 10 out of 10, but I would say in general, I'm probably gonna go ahead and give him a 9 out of 10 or so. So he's somewhere around there. So he's not got like the perfect bodybuilding physique, but he's got a really damn good physique. And could he compete in bodybuilding? In my opinion, I think he could compete in really high levels of amateur bodybuilding. Like he would obviously be the biggest guy on stage, and he would have, I think, pretty good proportions, enough to probably win some amateur competitions and maybe even turn pro. Now, at the pro level though, could he go against guys that have like pretty much perfect proportions and stuff? No, probably not. He might be able to make it onto the Olympia stage, but I think his proportions would just throw him off so much that I don't think he would be like top 5 or anything like that. But in my opinion, I think he could definitely be a pro bodybuilder. So that's how I think Hulk would do in bodybuilding. That's how good I think his physique is actually, which is very, very good. That's like top notch. So what do you guys think about Hulk's physique? Let me know in the comments down below, and who should I do next? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.